Hello again, here's the next strategy video in the Easy Strategy series. The question this time is, does my pricing make sense? Well, pricing is a pretty important subject and one that doesn't always get the attention perhaps that it deserves. For example, as you think about your own business, do you have a pricing policy? Who is it that makes the decisions about pricing? Have you made pricing mistakes in the past? It goes without saying that getting the right price on your products is absolutely critical to your financial success. Price them too high, you're apt to lose customers. Price them too low, you're giving away margin unnecessarily. It's a subject that really commands attention. You got to be thinking about what your kind of philosophy of pricing is, what kind of results you're expecting to achieve with it, what might be involved if you had a change in pricing and in pricing policy for that matter. So it's a tough subject, and there are many possible approaches to pricing. So I'm going to rattle off a few for you here. So that we can at least kind of inventory some of the various choices that are available to you. Well, first of all, in a fairly conventional sense, you can simply price your products with a given margin over the direct costs of producing them. Hopefully you have a decent cost accounting system, you know what your products cost you, you know what it costs you to get them to the market. And you can add to that an appropriate margin such that if you add everything together for the business, it'll result in a satisfactory return. So that's totally driven by costs. So I guess we'd call that cost plus pricing. Next, you can think about pricing solely or principally even in the context of position in the marketplace. Where does this put you in the market competitively vis-a-vis other producers of the product? You might also ask whether the demand for your product is fairly elastic. That is, the volume changes quite dramatically with just small changes in price, or whether it's relatively inelastic. People make major changes, doesn't seem to affect volume very much. You should have a point of view about that, and then think a little bit about where you are in the whole spectrum of offerings by competition in the marketplace, and what your pricing will say about what you're offering to customers, what that communicates to customers. Next, you might consider value-based pricing. In the case of some products are components of larger products, and your particular product may impart quite special value to your customer for making that larger device or system or a product, and it may have extraordinarily high value to that customer, or for that matter, it might not mean much at all. His product or system could even do without it in a pinch. You have to be thinking about what that value is, particularly when it's part of something else that your customer is offering. Next, if you're a seller of software applications, for example, to apps that will find problems in your desktop computer, that will clean out the junk on your computer, will protect you against viruses, etc., etc. Very often, those sorts of products are freemium priced. The producers engage in freemium pricing. What that means is that the product is offered to the prospective customer for free. They download it and start using it right away. But if they want advanced features, then they have to pay a premium to kind of unlock the real product. And sometimes this is exploited in a kind of unpleasant way. You've gone through the whole process, you've found out what the problems are in your computer, and then it turns out that only about 5% of them will be solved by the free version that you have. But if you really want to solve the problems that the software is supposed to be finding, you're going to have to go for the premium one. That can leave a kind of a bad taste, by the way, in customers' minds, so you've got to be a little bit careful of that. On the other hand, I think some producers say, okay, I'll offend a few people, but I sell so many of these things that I don't care. So anyway, you have to have a point of view about that. Next, you may find it necessary when entering a new market, at least a new market for you, that you have to price lower than the competition simply to attract trial by prospective customers and to try and steal away market share from the incumbents. The trick then is to decide how fast you can get away with kind of moving your prices back up to more or less the going rate in the marketplace. And of course you learn what works and what doesn't work by reactions to price changes from what happens to your volume and your sales successes. So that one's a little bit tricky, but certainly one that's very commonly used and may even be an essential tool to use in entering a new market. Next is the subject of variable pricing, more and more used these days by hotels, airlines, and so forth. They start out offering their rooms in the case of hotels or seats in the case of a plane at a fairly low and attractive price. And then if the hotel or the airplane starts to fill up faster than they would have projected, the price starts going up. And but of course, if nothing much happens, that price stays down in order to attract customers. And the objective of variable pricing for those sorts of businesses is to maximize the total revenue and at the same time operate at the last minute at capacity. So they want to sell the last seat or the last hotel room at the very last minute before it's necessary to stop and move on to the next offering. A tricky one, but one that has become a fine art. Virtually all airlines do this now. In the old days of airline cartels, of course, you knew what the price was. It never changed. In fact, it wasn't even any different from competition. Well, that game is long gone, and variable pricing is now absolutely the key. Then there's project pricing. Pricing is something that is tricky for managers of large projects, consultants, and so forth, who, for instance, install a big IT system in a company. They can, of course, charge by the hour, like lawyers do. Some do. But in other cases, they will quote a complete price for the whole project. And of course, it will often be tied to performance standards, in order for them to get the whole price that's been quoted and accepted. It has to achieve the performance standards that were specified in the contract, and it has to be usually completed by a certain time, or there'll be time penalties and so forth. So that's another whole area of pricing, quite a complicated one that requires spreadsheet analysis, probability analysis, examination of contingencies and project difficulties and what could go wrong and what the cost of putting them right would be, and so forth. And it's one that companies that offer the sale of big projects eventually have to develop a superior capability, or they'll get into trouble. And many organizations do get into trouble in this area. Finally, I'd mention one more, and that is bundle pricing. This is where you offer your product in conjunction with another product that is often used alongside your product, or even requires that both products be bought at the same time. And Amazon, of course, has perfected the use of bundle pricing in that almost anything you buy, they will suggest other things to go with it at a slight discount. So bundle pricing is something that makes sense when you have a product that is typically not used alone, but in conjunction with some related technology or other kind of physical product. Okay, well, there's a fairly substantial list of possible pricing mechanisms, policies, strategies, and so forth. There are others. And what I guess you're going to come out of this with is that I can't tell you which one to use, because of course it depends greatly on the situation you're in, the structure of the industry that you're in, the nature of the business, the intensity of competition within it, what your goals are, what the requirements for success in the business are, what customers are used to in the business, and so forth and so on. So it's up to you to spend some good thinking time and conferring with your decision-making colleagues on which policy makes sense, whether those that you're using now make sense, how you might be able to improve your fortunes by altering pricing policy and even trying something new to see if it works. A tough subject, but a really important one because it has such a huge potential impact on profitability and success in the marketplace. Okay, hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, give me a like, and I will see you at the next Easy Strategy series of questions. Bye-bye.